This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so let us get started with Chanukah, and the title is an eternal confrontation, meaning that Chanukah is an issue that we still deal with. The conflict is one that exists today to a great degree. And we'll see as we go through the sources that the conflict between Yisroel and Linda, just one second. Linda, please. The conflict between us and Yavan is a conflict that did not have to be what it ended up resulting in. But the way it did result is one that still we still have that battle today. Rabbi Yitzchak Berkovich, which is the source number one, he is presently the Rosh Yeshiva of Eish HaTorah, and a very, very brilliant and erudite Talmid Chacham. And he writes as follows: the striking aspect of celebrating Hanukkah each year is the realization, just one second, this is not coming out fully for them online here. Let's go to full screen mode, better. That the very same ideological battles that were fought 2,200 years ago, which prompted the Syrian-Greek offensive against the Jewish people, culminating in the Hanukkah miracles, are still being waged today and are poignantly relevant to the life of every Jew. How can this be? The Syrian-Greek war against Israel, replete with tank-like elephants, over 100,000 skilled soldiers, seems like an anomaly to Greek philosophy. The Greeks, home to the schools of Plato and Aristotle, sought to systematically understand, classify knowledge of the world. They were primarily intellectuals, not militants. Why should the Syrian-Greek army attack the Jewish nation? Israel was not a military threat. The Syrian-Greek target was Judaism, and Judaism alone. Jews who adopted the Greek worldview of Hellenism were embraced. Hellenism was certainly a challenge for many Jews attracted to the intellectualism and logic of the Greek culture that postulated that man created religion. Nevertheless, what was so appalling to the Syrian Greeks that they sought to destroy Judaism and her adherents? And it's interesting, if you learn through the Rambam, Maimonides, Moreh Nevuchim, Guide to the Perplexed, he quotes Aristotle quite often disagreeing, but not always. The Greeks taught that man was the center of the universe. There is no God. One does not look beyond the physical world. It is man who has the need to create God, they say. In contrast, Judaism teaches that man is almost at the center of the universe. But the primary force is God, who created, sustains, guides the universe, creates man with a divine soul, empowers us with the ability to impact both this world and eternal spiritual worlds that transcend physical existence. The Greeks could not tolerate that the Jewish people lived Judaism as a dynamic reality, which was an affront and threat to Greek thought and culture. 2,200 years later, the Jewish world is still divided between those influenced by Hellenism, who view Chanukah and hence Judaism as tradition, something of sentimental value that contributes some meaning to life, but ultimately is not real. And in contrast, those who see Judaism as a reality where each action has cosmic implications. That was the battle then, and that is the battle that we have today between Judaism and a secularist Jewish approach, and basically it's just these nice, quaint traditions, but basically a secular approach to Judaism. Is it real? Is it not real? I just learned something this morning with I have a chavrusa with Mark Kirschbaum Thursday mornings, and we're learning Nefesh HaChaim. And he says there that the words of the Amidah are so powerful that, and I did it today during Mincha, and it was very powerful. He said, as you're saying the words, realize that you're sending those words up into the spiritual world. As I was saying each word, I kind of felt that word. I didn't feel it, but I sensed that word flying off the page and going up to its place. Right? That is the cosmic implications of all that we do. I've given us a little timeline over here. So we have a sense, right, in the Jewish year 3408, which was 353 before the common error, ERROR, as I like to say, right? That was the building of the Second Temple. Antiochus IV reigns, 175 BCE. Now, and we'll see that Alexander was of a very different caliber and approach. Antiochus is where things just devolved down to a very, very base level, which of course led to the attack against us. 165 BCE, Chanukah, conquest of the temple by the Hashmonaim. And the years 140 to 36 BCE was the rule of the Hashmonaim. Now that was an error. That was a mistake that they made. After they had brought about their miraculous deliverance, what should they have done in terms of the monarchy, in terms of royalty, kingdom? Transfer it to Judah. They kept it for themselves, and that is why they were completely wiped out. 36 to 68 CE, right? Here we are, right? A little less than 2,000 years ago, rule of of Roman governors and the Herodian dynasty, and then 3862 Jewish years, 68 in our calendar now, CE, Romans destroy the Second Temple. Okay. The story behind the events of Chanukah begins, source number 2, with the Greek conquest of the kingdom of Judea by the military force of Alexander the Great in 320 BCE. The Gemara relates a story of the enemies of the Jewish people telling Alexander how the Jews are rebelling and the Jews are trying to destroy his kingdom, and he's on his way to battle against us, to put us in our place. Who comes out to meet him, the Gemara tells us? Who was that? Shimon HaTzadik. Simon Shimon the righteous, who was a Kohen Gadol. And they're traveling through the night to meet up with one another. During daybreak, they meet up with one another. And Alexander gets off of his steed and bows down to Shimon HaTzadik. His entourage says, "Why are you bowing down to this Jew?" And he said, "Every time I go out to battle, I see a vision of him, of this person, and then I am victorious in battle." And we'll soon see from the psukim, the verses that speak about the earliest aspects of Israel and of Yavan, that there could have been, should have been, might have been this partnership, which seemed to have been the case over there. Let me see if this is a teret. It's not a teret. Just 1 second. Let me see if a teret is on. Okay. Thank God. Thank God, doing a lot better. Not content to be mere military conquerors, the Greeks maintained a vision of a conquest that extended beyond just physical subjugation. They wanted their culture to dominate the world, and hence always sought to spread its influence within the territories under their control. Long before the actual events of Hanukkah took place, Greek culture, Hellenism, started to make itself felt within the Jewish population. As Paul Johnson notes in The History of the Jews, the impact of Hellenization on educated Jews was in many ways similar to the impact of the Enlightenment on the 18th century ghetto. It was a destabilizing force spiritually, and above all, it was a secularizing, materialistic force. In response to Hellenization, internal conflicts soon arose within the Jewish people as those who favored the new trend confronted those who did not. Eventually, there developed a movement of Jews whose aim it was to force the pace of Hellenization by purging Judaism of those elements that limited the advancement of Greek culture. I mentioned in an earlier class this week, I forget which one, that very often, as in today, our worst enemies are the Jews who turn against their Judaism. The Jewish Voice for Peace are the most violently anti-Israel group that you could ever find, right? Bernie Sanders, right, is one who undermines Judaism, and the fact that they're Jewish gives them credibility and gives them cover with which they can undermine Judaism and Jewish aspects. So to over here, what happened? They want to force the pace. Who wanted to force the pace of Hellenization? The Jews who became Hellenized wanted to force the pace. In the year 175 BC, these Jewish Hellenizers gained a powerful ally with the ascendancy of Antiochus IV Epiphanes to the throne of the Seleucid Empire. Like those before him, Antiochus was disturbed to find the Jews still holding on to their own religion and worshiping their own God in blatant disregard of the Greek deities. Yes.
I always find it fascinating when learning history that we existed then and we were active then and here we are today.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And all the Greeks have to say for themselves is some yogurt. That's it. That's all they've got going for them at this point. Yeah. 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 To further advance the cause of Hellenization, Antiochus issued decrees banning any religious or cultural practices not in line with Hellenism that we discussed last week. The observance of Brit Milah, Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh. He was a vicious dictator bent on the destruction of Judaism. Women who circumcised their babies were executed with their dead babies hung around their necks. A special directive was also sent to stop the sacrificial service in the temple. The temple itself was desecrated and turned into a place where non-kosher animals were offered to the pagan gods. Okay. As we know, what happened was, let's go through it though, source number 3, the efforts to homogenize Judaism with Greek culture, right? To homogenize the two cultures, right? People often say that America is a melting pot. A melting pot is a problem. Melting pot, all the items inside become all the same. One big mush. I'm sorry? Yes, yes. Judaism, the way we prefer it, let it be a chant, meaning each item retains its own identity, flavor, but gets along beautifully with all the others and are able to coexist and even to enhance one another. Pious Jews willingly martyred themselves before the face of imposed apostasy, but isolated incidents of resistance eventually developed into outright rebellion. The initial military revolt was led by one Judah the Maccabee, an epitaph awarded him for his Maccabee for his famous battle cry, Mi chamocha be'elim Hashem. Me, who? Kamocha is like you, Memkaf, ba'elim amongst the powers, Hashem. Yud K Vav K. Mem Kaf Bet Yud Mi Kamocha Be'elim Hashem. That is Maccabee. Judah was joined by his 5 brothers, all sons of Matisyahu, the patriarch of the priestly Chashmonaim family. Legend has it that a Seleucid general once described these 5 Jewish heroes as stronger than lions, lighter than eagles, quicker than bears. Despite the extraordinary odds stacked against them, the children of Matisyahu miraculously succeeded in their battles against the Greeks. Without divine intervention, the enemy would have swiftly crushed the small band of religious Jews. Instead, after a short period of intense fighting, the Maccabees freed Jerusalem from the Seleucid control and isolated the Hellenized Jews to the northern port city of Acre. Finally, on the 25th day of the month of Kislev, on the year 165 BCE, the Maccabees returned to the temple. As they said about repairing all that had been vandalized, God had a second miracle in store. When the pagan Hellenists invaded, they desecrated the menorah and sabotaged the oil reserves. When the Maccabees finally regained control, they could find only 1 jug of oil, fit for the lighting of the new menorah in the temple hall. The Jews used the little oil they found, and something extraordinary happened. It kept on burning day after day. It burned for 8 days, even though there was enough oil for 1, giving them the time they needed to produce new, pure oil. Right? I always say a great question if you ever ask at a Hanukkah meal is say to people, so what happened? So it was only enough for 1 day. It burned 8 days. What happened on the 9th day? Ooh, that's a good question, Rabbi. Yeah, by the 8th day, the 2 approaches that we have is either they had gone through the 7-day purification process and were now able to make new pure oil, or the oil was actually a 4-day journey away from where they were. Therefore, 4 days there, 4 days back. Day 9, we are good to go again. This conflict, we'll soon see, has its roots in the Torah, source number 4, and did not have to be such a conflict. And Rabbi David Foreman has a beautiful piece on this, a 3-part piece, which I encourage all to, if you have the time, to listen to it. And beauty is a different type of pleasure than most pleasures. Normally we have our physical pleasures, things that we eat, things that we touch, things that we immerse ourselves in. Beauty, you see a beautiful sunset, a beautiful sunrise. You see the ocean, you see mountains, you see flowers, you see incredible, right? When you see this beauty, poetry, it's almost otherworldly. It takes us beyond just our physical world. It takes us to a different level.
It becomes visual, which becomes spiritual.
Yeah.
The visual then links to the spiritual because it becomes in our mind, in our soul. We no longer see it, we feel it. It's within us. Good. It's a different way.
Yes.
Food you eat, it tastes,
But the question is, where does that then lead to? Does that first step towards the spiritual lead us into a greater realm of spirituality? Or does it stop there and not continue on?
It depends.
Well, we're going to come to that. Yeah. All right. And Rabbi Foreman puts it very well. When looking at the incredible world that we are in, so there are 2 approaches when we try to figure out, right, why does all this exist? One answer is, why not? The other answer is because. The secular world is, why not? Why not? Right? Aristotle, Plato thought the world was always here, always it was here. Why not? That's the Big Bang. It just so happened to happen. Actually, I was at a wedding a number of months ago, and I bumped into a student that I had taught in high school, right? When I was teaching high school before I came out here to California. So it had been a good 16, 17 years since I've seen this fellow. And he wasn't sure if I really remembered him or not. I'm usually pretty good. People always think, but I did remember him. And I said, Adam, I'll tell you exactly the question that you asked me one time. His eyebrows went up. I said we were discussing the mathematical impossibility, or it's one in gazillion of this world being habitable for life as it is today. Right? One with zeros going from here literally to the moon. That's what it is. And what you said to me, Adam, is yes, but if there are that many universes, then it makes sense that it will happen. Right? Now, in fact, there's not enough matter in the universe for all of those universes that he speaks about. Whatever the case is. He looked at me and he says, you're right. That sounds like me in high school. Yes, Rabbi, you do remember me. But that's the why not answer. Why is it here? Why does everything exist? Why not? The other approach is because there is a reason. There is a God who orchestrated this for a purpose. So it's either why not or it's because. Beauty is something that could elevate us beyond our simple physical selves as a stepping stone to greater, or beauty can become something that hits its glass ceiling, and it is all that it is. And then anyone or anything that seeks to go against this beauty, that there is more, becomes the enemy. Let's hear about the very first encounter of Israel and Yavan. And the sons of Noah who emerged from the ark were Shem, Cham, and Yefet. From them the world spread out. Vayachel, Noach, Ish, Hadama, Vayita, Karen. Noach degraded himself to a certain degree. He went from an Ish Tzaddik, who's referred to as a righteous person, to a man of the earth. And he planted a vineyard. Now, he's supposed to plant a vineyard. All the saplings that he took along were meant to be planted. It's a matter of priority, though. That was not meant to be the first thing. He drank of the wine, made himself drunk, and was laying there uncovered in his tent. Cham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness, told his two brothers outside, Shem and Yefet. Shem, we are descendants of Shem, and Yavan is a descendant of Yefet. Vayikach Shem v'Yefet et hasimla. The two of them took the garment. Vayasimo Shechem Shem, they placed it on their shoulders. Vayelchu achoranit, and they walked in backwards so as to not see the nakedness of their father. Vayichasu et ervat avim, and they covered the erva of their father. V'neim achoranit. And even they had to turn around in order to do it, but they averted their faces. Their faces were turned so as to not see their father's nakedness. Noach awoke, understood what his son had done to him with the younger son, cursed Canaan, but here's our last pasuk. Vayomer, he said, Baruch Hashem, Elokei Shem. Blessed be God, the Lord of Shem, v'hi Canaan eved lamo, and Canaan shall be his slave. Yaft Elokim liyefet. Vayishkon ba'alei Shem. Yaft Elokim liyefet. Either may God expand Yefet, or the beauty of Elokim is to Yefet. Vayishkon ba'alei shame, but he will dwell in the tents of shame. Now we know the tents of shame are the study halls. We're told that Yaakov spent time studying in the Beit Midrash of shame and Aver. So the beauty of Yefet was meant to partner together with the study hall of shame. And we find this. The Gemara Megillah tells us a Sefer Torah or scripture has to be written in Lashon HaKodesh, right? Well, he says there's an exception. Source number Shimon Gamliel Omer, Apason lo tir shiktavu el Yevanit. The only language besides Hebrew the one can write the Torah, prophets, and writings, Tanakh, it can be written in Greek. My time, what's his reason? Where does he get that from? Our pasuk. Yafta Elokim liyefet v'yishkon b'halei shem. Devarav, the words of Yefet, the language, the beautiful language of Yefet, that can be found b'halei shem, in the tents of shame. And we also hear the story about Talmei HaMelech, also in the Gemara Megillah. The Septuagint was the Greek translation of the Torah. Now, the Gemara cites some unsavory motives that they had in this translation, that it was to a degree to discredit the Torah, to show inaccuracies or to show fallacies in the Torah, and miraculously, the 72 sages who were each put into separate quarters, separate rooms, without being told why they were being gathered and set aside, and they were each told to translate the Torah. They each made certain revisions in the Torah so it should not be twisted by Talmei HaMelech against them. One of them being that the Arnevet is a non-kosher animal. His wife's name was Arnevet. And they thought, oh, if he sees Arnevet, he'd say, oh, the Jews are making fun of me, putting my wife in there as an unkosher animal. So they changed that. But more fundamentally, they changed not Bereshit bara Elokim, which is in the beginning of God's creation, but can be misconstrued as Bereshit bara Elokim. Oh, there's a super God named Bereshit. That bara Elokim, that created God. And then there's the God that we deal with. There's the super God before that God. So they said, right, Bereshit bara, Elokim bara Bereshit. God created in the beginning. So there were changes that they made. But besides all of that, those motives, at the root, as the Maharal says in source number 7, the central feature of the Greek nation was their desire for wisdom. That is why they requested the sages to translate Torah for them, as it says in the Gemara Megillah. And this is a testament that they were more inclined to wisdom than any other nation. Rav Hirsch speaks about, in source number 8, the shared mission. Our pasuk in Bereshit again, that's the start of all this. In Bereshit, the Torah says, Yafta Elokim liyefet v'yishkon ba'alei shem. Right? The Lord has given Yefet beauty. Let him reside in the tents of shame. Meaning, as we said, let beauty be that vehicle towards the transcendent. Let that be what lifts us up and brings us to a recognition of God. And then once there's a recognition of God, there's nothing that we want more to do than to conform our will to his will, to do that which is lofty and holy in his eyes. In Yefet come together reason and the desire for the spiritual. Yefet reaches its peak in the culture of Yavan, Greece. One of the sons of Yefet, I didn't mention, one of the sons of Yefet was Yavan. Yavan is Greece. And until today, these two remain, Israel and Yavan, representing Sinai and humanism. Yefet beautified the world from an aesthetic point of view, while Shem enlightened the world from an ethical, moral perspective. Yefet prepares the ground for the mission of Shem. First, let a person be imbued with the ideas of the beautiful and the good in the spirit of the Greeks. Afterwards, let him proceed to be imbued with that which is still more beautiful and elevated and harmonious, the godly. So we reach that which is incredible, inspiring, uplifting, meant to bring us then to godly. There was a conflict between the two perspectives of life, two cultures, which until today are struggling for dominance in the world. The Greek nation stood at the pinnacle of culture. Of all the descendants of Yefet, the Greeks taught to all the other nations the beautiful and explained that that which is beautiful is also good. However, at the pinnacle of the culture of the children of Shem stood Aver, whose descendants became the Hebrew nation, which plants its tents according to the will of Hashem, in order to sanctify his name. They build a temple of justice and love. The mission of both cultures is to cover the animalistic nakedness in man, as both of them did when Noah became naked, revealed in his tent. It is to cover the animalistic nakedness in man. Both were destined to raise man to the level of the human and the godly, to subdue by proper education the influence of Ham, the hot-blooded roughneck who desires the animalistic nakedness. All of the history of the world till our day represents the constant struggle regarding the above prophecy. The Lord has given beauty. Until the appearance of the Greeks, the human spirit and human feelings developed only under the influence of necessity, the events of life. Man found no opportunity to develop self-respect. He recognized only fear as a motivation and a means to overcome desires. But from his essential nature, man remained mean-spirited, cruel, narrow-minded, enslaved. The culture of Greece aroused the desire for logic, enlightenment, a yearning for great ideas, the opening of the spiritual life of a person through the contemplation of harmonious and beautiful essences of things, and by means of the control of his overwhelming desires. So did the culture of Greece develop the feeling of self-respect within man. It could arouse trust in oneself, give a person responsibility for the conduct of his life. In short, the spirit of Greece freed man from the change which bound him, enlightened him with culture, beautified his spirit, and filled him with the joy of life. The spirit of enlightenment, which emanated from Greece in its pure form, never constituted a danger to the holy ways of Israel, inasmuch as Israel sees it as a contributing cause to the realization of its own destiny, namely, the enlightenment of mankind and improvement. Then it was always proper to bring into his tent the truth and the pure humanity associated with that spirit. That is what it was meant to be. And as I'm reading this beautiful words from Rabbi Hirsch, I can't help but think about the German nation during World War II, which was all about culture, opera, right? Classical music, the arts, philosophy, the greatest culture of the world, which, when it was devoid from the tents of shame, joined together with the bloodlust of Echam and turned into killing machines, murder machines.
Because the two don't meet. The two don't meet. Spiritual and cultural don't necessarily meet.
They don't necessarily meet. Ideally, one was meant to uplift one beyond the base physical and get to the other. But when one does not allow it to get to the other, then one turns, as Antiochus did against the Jews, as the Germans did against the Jews, then it turns with fury against those who dare suggest that there's more than that which they are willing to entertain. The Ramban.
You could see, for example, somebody was telling me that they went to the game in France, and the whole country was crazy with the game. what is it called?
The World Cup.
World Cup. And yet, you go to a concert or you go to an art museum, you never get that kind of fury.
Yeah.
You don't get that because one is easier to be part of. A World Cup is easier to be part of
Yeah.
because you don't need spiritual for a World Cup.
Yeah.
But you need spiritual to go to a concert, to go to a museum.
Yeah.
And there's something missing. And because it's missing, that's where the Germans failed, and that's where the Greeks failed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they
But it
thought
didn't
they
have
could
to be
get
like
it.
that.
They thought
Yes.
they could get it.
Yes.
And it's not something you can just get.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
in the arts, as a lot of people know. And I
Yeah.
have that a lot, that people don't understand when they see a work of art or a piece of music or something
Yeah.
like that. They don't
I
get
hear.
it. They don't
Yep.
feel it. It's absent.
Yes. Gabrielle, what did you want to say?
I have a question about, I don't know if this connects, as far as like Chanukah and the Irvine, like what about the fact that there was a jar of oil left? Like I know there's a lot of theories as to, okay, was it divided, in 1/8 and a little bit each night, and there's concepts behind that, many. So my question is, could this connect to the idea that perhaps is there anything in the Mefarshim about like the Greeks actually leaving the last jar of oil? Like, could that be a connection?
So I don't think anyone views it that was intentionally left for us. Yeah. That was not what they were looking to do.
I only asked in
connections. Always good to ask. The Ramban, one of the classic commentators, Nachmanides, 11th century in Vayikra, Hamitchakmim b'teva nimshachim acharei Yavani, those who go the way of the Greek philosophy, right? Aristotle, asher hichish kol davar zulati hamurgash lo, deny the reality of anything that cannot be murgash, cannot be physically sensed. V'hikis daito, and he had the audacity, he had the arrogance, lachshov, he thought, and Talmidav Hashem and his disciples, ki kol inyan shelo hisig alav, hu b'svarato, einano emet. Anything which we can't understand or fathom cannot be. Which I always liken that to saying, God can't be any smarter than I am. Right? So if it doesn't make sense to me, then obviously it can't be. It doesn't make sense. And as I always like to say, I don't want to worship a God that's as smart as I am. I don't think I'm a fool. At the same time, I don't want to worship a God that is as smart as I am. Right? And that is where many other strains of Judaism, in my view, go off the deep end. That if it works for you, do it. If it doesn't work for you, there's no reason to do it. There is no you must. If it works for you, you do it. If not, you don't do it. Well, that's basically saying I'm worshiping myself. I'm worshiping what makes sense to me. I'm not worshiping God. I'm worshiping myself. Right? Pinchas Stolper, based on Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, was one of the great Jewish thinkers of the 20th century, Rosh Hashiva in Brooklyn. There was an intense, source number 10, an intense commitment by the Greeks to intellectual inquiry and an effort to understand the natural world. However, Greek philosophy and thought was dominated by their fixation on nature, where human choice plays no role. Why is there anything? Why does anything exist? Why not? Nature. This intellectual fixation made it impossible for the Greeks to comprehend or appreciate the Jews' Torah, which is totally rooted in the spiritual world created by God and sustained through human choice. While both Israel and the Greeks are highly intellectual, the Greeks viewed reality through the lens of the physical, where compulsion rules, right? And we have all these theories today of determinism, whether it's genetic determinism, whether it's societal determinism, but basically you have no choice, and all of your actions are all dictated by all these different forces, be it genetic, be it societal, be it the way you were brought up, and there is no way of there is no idea of veering in the wrong direction, correct the ship, right the ship. No, right? There is this determinism where compulsion rules. Through their study of nature and the constellations, the Greeks saw the world as mechanical and automatic. And the world does have its laws of physics that it goes according to. But why should the entire universe work according to these laws of physics? Two answers. Why not? Or because. That's what it comes down to. Why not? And therefore we can make incredible predictions and understand the universe because it all is according to these laws. But why should there be laws? And that's a question that Einstein asked. Why should there be these laws of physics, these immutable laws of physics that are built into our universe? Why not? Or because.
What about a cause instead of B cause?
They then extended the rules of nature to all aspects of life, so that Greek wisdom and intellect inexorably led to the development of a philosophy that drove the Greeks to misunderstand and oppose Jewish intellectualism. Because once again, once you're not willing to take the next step, those who dare to take the next step are undermining who you are, what you're about. And then it turns brutal. Then it's no longer this intellectual debate that we're going to engage in. Lastly, from Rav Dessler, Michtav Eliyahu. Rav Dessler was the Mashkiach Ruchani, meaning the spiritual guide. Right? Mashkiach means to oversee. There's a mashkiach in the kitchen who oversees the kashrut, and a yeshiva has its Mashkiach Ruchani, its spiritual shepherd, we'll call it. Right? He was the Mashkiach Ruchani of the Gateshead Yeshiva in England, and eventually moved to Israel and became the Mashkiach Ruchani of the Panovich Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. And his classic is the Michtav Me'Eliyahu, a 5-part series of Svarim. The Michtav Me'Eliyahu, literally the letters from Eliyahu, from Elijah. He was Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler. Translated, 3 of the volumes are translated into English as Strive for Truth. And he writes, through the total and absolute dedication of the Hashmonaim to Judaism, they rose to the level of being purely selfless in their commitment. And this was the essential spiritual reason that they merited to overcome the Greeks. They were willing to give all their lives against incredible odds for that next step that the Yevanim were not willing to take and were fighting against. And the miracle of the oil that the lights were not extinguished showed them a sign from heaven, which revealed that their hearts contained an eternal inner light. That our hearts contain this eternal inner light, which cannot and is not and is never extinguished. You know, it's interesting. We say in Al Hanisim that they lit the lights b'chatzrot kadshecha, in the courtyards of your holiness, the chatzer. But it wasn't lit in the chatzer, in the courtyards. Where was the menorah placed? Not our Chanukah. When they lit the lights, where is that? Where was that? In the holy. Not the Holy of Holies was just the Aron, but in the Kodesh, in the holy. So what do you mean they lit the lights b'chatzrot kadshecha? They lit the lights, and I think the Bnei Yissaschar, one of the commentators says as follows. Let me add just a little bit. The windows of the Beit HaMikdash were constructed in an unusual fashion. Our windows here have the same dimensions, the outside and the inside. What was often done was the outer dimensions were smaller, the inner dimensions were wider. This gave you good protection from the elements outside, but then allow the light to spread out, and therefore it was well lit, even though there was just a small hole, because narrow on the outside, wide on the inside, the light then spreads out and illuminates. The Beit HaMikdash, we're told, was the opposite. There, it was narrow on the inside and wide on the outside. Why is that? To show that we, the Beit HaMikdash, does not need the light of the world, but rather it is the light of the Beit HaMikdash which the world needs. And therefore, when they lit the menorah, that then finally illuminated the Chatzrot Kadshecha. That sent its illumination out into the world. And that is the idea that it is the illumination of holiness. The miracle happened with the menorah. There were many other kalim, vessels of the temple, which had become desecrated. And if God wanted to send us a miracle, as he did, we have to examine why was the menorah the chosen vessel of the temple through which this miracle came about. And it has to do with all that we've been discussing over here. And that is that the menorah is all about the illumination, the spiritual light that's meant to permeate this world. And the Yevanim could have been the partners. Yafta Lakim Liyechet V'Yishkon Ba'alei Shem could have been the partners, but never did. Or I shouldn't say never. With Alexander and Shimon HaTzadik, there was a certain partnership that was happening over there. But with the death of Alexander, and then the kingdom being split up, and then it devolved to a much more base coarse level, which did not allow for that light to shine through from the beauty into the spiritual realm, where the beauty is meant to elevate us, right? When we see a beautiful part of nature, when we see that, we become, it's a transcendent feeling. It's otherworldly is a term that we often use to describe it. It's meant to lift us up and then have that light shine out, right? And that is how we celebrate. I don't want to say commemorate, how we celebrate and we re-experience the miracle that happened then and the lesson, which is that the light has to keep on burning, the light has to shine, and it's not these garish flashing lights that we often see, but it's the still, consistent, steady light of the menorah. That is what brings the Kedusha. That represents the Kedusha, the holiness of this world. And it's fine to admire beauty, but beauty should not be in a Greek fashion, an end in and of itself, but it needs to be a vehicle which helps lift us up and touch that which is so much far beyond us. Dov, is this advised or ill-advised?
What about J-Lo?
Please, I'm asking you to use your discretion.
Well, what's the end is, where's the proof of this miracle with the oil? Because people, how many people can go in there and see it? And so where's the proof?
Why do you feel you need proof more than the Masorah that we have this miracle
Because
happened?
they could make up anything to get the people excited if they wanted to. That's why.
I think the people will be very excited about winning the war and not being subjugated more than they'll be so excited about the oil.
Yeah,
right? The oil is not so exciting.
So I think
right?
the other one's not proof.
Okay. On that note, thank you, everybody. Linda, good seeing you over there.
Rabbi, I just